So, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the GIMI Innovation Think Tank. This event happens every week, and we talk about trends of what's changing in the world and what will make impact. If we can't imagine the future through trends, we cannot create that future. We also talk about innovation management. If you want to imagine the future and create that future, you need to know how to do that. Innovation management are the techniques, tools on how to build teams and how to drive innovation from beginning to end. What are the latest on that ideas? That's the second theme that GIMI Think Tank covers. And the third theme is we like to know what's going on around the world, around innovations. We talk about in countries. And so today we've got an excellent team from the Philippines, and the organization is called Ambigan, and it's led by Rolan Marco Garcia, along with Kristine, and they have been working on corporate venturing. And corporate venturing is another leg of innovation for corporations in terms of how they get ideas and how they can find growth engines. For the longest time, we left startups on the outside. And now the question was, how do you actually bring startup culture, startup organizations into your organizations? And do you do this through venture capital? Do you do this through a corporate venturing business unit? Do you do this at the CFO level of a company? Do you do it within your R&D group? And all those kind of questions. But the big thing over here is for those who are paying attention, there were over $60 billion of investments made or funds raised in corporations with the intention of investing in startups worldwide. So this is no longer a trend. This is a reality. And Rolan and his team is going to talk about this thing. He and I had a great conversation with Kristine a couple of weeks ago about what they're doing. And I think for each one of you, this is going to be great. Let's put Rolan on the thing, and he will introduce himself also in the process. So let's get Rolan up, and so I can talk to Rolan side by side.
Hey, HP, hey, everyone. Yeah, I think Kristine is on here also.
Okay, good. So Rolan is a graduate from the Asian Institute of Management, and that's the school he comes out of. And he graduated a couple of years ago, but he's one of those movers and shakers. In a very short time, he built a innovation consulting practice in the Philippines, which is now perhaps the largest innovation consulting practice in the country. So Rolan, congratulations on having achieved so much in such a short time. And then the other thing that Rolan has been doing for all of us is in our partnership as GIMI, we have a lot of students who graduate from the Asian Institute of Management. And the AIM is the leading business school of the Philippines. And on top of that, it's based and copied exactly in format to the Harvard Business School. And so historically, Mark Fuller and his father and others were the ones who helped build that school. And so the students that come out of the school are amazing. And to date, Rolan, how many students have graduated from AIM with a certificate from GIMI, approximately?
100 maybe, 100 or so.
Yeah. So a couple of months ago, I was in Philippines, and Rolan organized an event to bring together all the innovation people of the Philippines in one place. And the majority of them were GIMI people. So it was fantastic to see so many people who were doing innovation, and they'd all come to see people speak and the event of their accelerator that they were building and all that. And then we have Kristine with us also, who used to work at Procter & Gamble previously, and all the skills in P&G of innovation. This is one of the companies that produced the most innovative people on the planet. I would like to say the other one was Motorola. So Kristine, welcome on this thing. But P&G certainly has produced a lot of market-facing innovators, brand-facing, consumer insights types of individuals that has changed the world. So today, Rolan, Kristine, I'm going to give you the floor. I'll give you a chance to introduce Ambigan, but also the importance of corporate venturing. And I want to make sure for everybody who's listening, corporate venturing is another leg of the stool of growth strategies for companies. You can innovate with internal teams. You can innovate with external teams. You can innovate with startups, and then you can somehow blend this thing together with equity and venture building capability together to make something happen. So with that, Rolan, Kristine, welcome, and we're really excited to hear from you about corporate venturing.
Thank you, HP. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and fix this. All right. So we'll probably take 20 to 30 minutes of your time, and then we can get into a conversation about venture building as I think a direct extension of what we do in GIMI, and of course the consulting work in IXL, right? Um, okay, so let's three parts. We'll probably introduce and begin first, and that will be my part, and then Kristine will jump over to talk about the two legs of corporate innovation vehicles, that are different vehicles that we've seen corporations do in terms of innovation. And the difference, for example, with corporate venture building as opposed to the different types of corporate innovation vehicles. The introduction of Embiggen. So we're from the Philippines. We're incorporated in Singapore. I just got back from Singapore, met a few of Hitendra's friends there. But Embiggen right now is trying to expand in the ASEAN, coming out from Singapore. We're a multi-awarded international innovation and venture building firm. Essentially, we build new businesses and corporations. It's what we're going to talk about today. We do foresight practice. So we want to hedge against the future, want to help corporations hedge against the future. Obviously, we want to cultivate an innovation, an entrepreneurial workforce, and this is essentially a partnership with GIMI, as well as lay down the groundwork for an innovative company. Most of these companies, as we all know here, don't have a formal innovation structure. So we do that in partnership with GIMI. Okay. So here's a few people behind Embiggen. So myself leading the team with some of my co-founders, Earl, who is in the US, worked for Ray Dalio in Bridgewater before, Charles Schwab in New York, Stanford and Cornell. Of course, Kristine here, I think is her longest stint was in J&J. PNG did her MBA in ESADE in Spain, and transitioned back to startups and early stage ventures back in the Philippines. Jimbo is heading our consulting practice, also educating Cornell. Before he did innovation, he was one of the executives, one of the biggest firms here in the Philippines. And of course, Paul and Pam. The team also, the other ventures team, here you go. Of course, is headed by Kristine. She's the managing director of our venture building practice, along with Pauline and Sky, who are also AIM alumnus. So all of these team members have both either have founded their own startups or is employee number one, employee number two in tech ventures, as well as a very deep experience in corporate, which I think is a very important point in trying to build a venture building team or getting into corporate venture building. These are some of our advisors that has recently joined Embiggen. So Frank Matt from Germany, Mohan from Singapore, Cliff, Gary, Mon. I think Gary's here with us from the Philippines. Gary, for example, was former CEO of one of the biggest market research firms in the world, which is Kantar, based in the UK. Right? So he headed the Philippine business. And this is why we think corporate venture building is very important. Business leaders predict that by 2026, half or 50% of their revenues will come from products, services, or businesses that have not yet been created. And what you've seen in practice, and again, that one factor that still sets winners apart is their ability to build successful new businesses. And this actually, we can call them serial business builders. 6 of the world's 10 largest companies continuously and consistently build new businesses, whether that's investing in early stage startup, building from within, or building strategically aligned corporate ventures. However, what we've seen is that all of these innovation or at least corporate venture building, corporate ventures usually fail because of 3 things: mindset, skill set, and execution. Usually in corporate ventures, you need people who think big, act fast. In terms of skill set, they need to be able to iterate quickly, be able to withstand, for example, the hardships that come with innovation and entrepreneurship. And of course, in terms of execution, need to be quiet, capital efficient. But most entrepreneurs that we know are able to build sizable businesses or startups with very little resources, which is usually not the case in big corporations. A lot of employees are used to big budgets, for example. And what we've seen is that we need to be able to build ventures or test and validate those particular solutions with a little or less capital as possible. So what we think is the key ingredient to building successful corporate ventures or corporate innovation is combining the strength of an incumbent with the agility of the startup, right? And this is usually where we come in. As Embiggen, we become the co-founders of those ventures. So Embiggen, we have seasoned tech entrepreneurs. We have experience for idea to scale, venture back. Of course, the startup founder's mindset, which is very important. The innovation methodology and process, and a lot of those we borrow from GIMI and IXL. Combine that with the corporate partners' deep market and industry experience, their scale strength, right? Assets and resources, and of course, capital and day zero investment, among other things, right? And this is firm that says, corporates can beat startups at their own game, right? So this particular strategic partnership with corporations results to a co-created innovation portfolio of new ventures built or invested on. It's interesting to note here that corporate startups, at least in literature, what we've seen is have higher success rates than typical startups, right? So corporate startups have 1/8 probability of success versus typical startups 1:500 probability of success. And this is because typical startups don't have the resources, again, the skill strength of an incumbent or a large organization, large corporation. And we think that this is the future of corporate innovation. This is a new way of building ventures that we think can accelerate the solution to the world's problems. So this is the usual typical engagement team setup. So we have usually an innovation council from the corporation, an executive sponsor, and of course the corporate innovation team that usually works with us in this particular regard. And the team of Embiggen, usually composed of the things here or the functions here, usually are we call them venture architects. They don't build buildings, but they build ventures. Right? They design from idea to testing to scale to launch. And of course, all these teams will have the tech team, the product team, and the market team as the co-founding team partnering strategically with the corporation. So in any stage of venture building, Embiggen has the capability to be able to do it. Of course, the venture board is available to us, our team. This is a steering committee. The venture team, of course, that usually develops the ventures from discovery to pilot. Venture growth also by the venture team, and of course the expert board, the advisory board members who help us scale these ventures and align it with the corporation. So what makes us different is really a combination of both corporate innovation leadership or deep corporate experience and entrepreneurship, which we think, as we mentioned earlier, is the key ingredient to making successful ventures, right? So we need to be able to have both corporate experience and entrepreneurial experience and combine those to build corporate ventures that can withstand the hardships of entrepreneurship. And that's what we think is what we bring to the table. So Embiggen, throughout the years, we've become a full service innovation partners for we do consulting. We have our Innovation Institute, which are a capability building arm. And of course, we have Embiggen Ventures, which is we work with corporate, and we're building our own studio focused on artificial intelligence. Some of the things we do, we work with the biggest sports retailer brand here. We also work with foreign embassy to look at the market in terms of the discovery. We designed the venture with a Swiss firm, obviously in Switzerland, to design a solution concept for a different way of doing container loading supervision. A family business, for example, to close its gap for its growth aspiration, right, who is in retail. and a few other things, right? So what I'll do now is I'll turn it over to Kristine, who heads our corporate venture unit, and talk about different corporate innovation vehicles, just to set the context and the difference between these vehicles and corporate venture building. Kristine?
Hey, thanks, Rolan. Just checking if everyone can hear me well. Yep. Okay. Okay, maybe you can go to the next slide, please. So yeah, this is actually how we see the different corporate innovation vehicles. And just before I begin, this is not really in a way to isolate one thing or another, because we know that one mode sometimes bleeds into another, or, boundaries tend to blur. But just so we can have a framework. For us at Begin, we see that there are around 3 main routes to corporate innovation today, right? So there's mergers and acquisitions, or M&A as we know it. There's venture capital, and specific to corporates or organizations, it's CVC, or corporate venture capital. And then the last leg is corporate venture building, for which we feel there are 2 ways around this. One is something we call external corporate venture building, and another is internal CVB. And I'll talk about the difference later on. Now, if we were to just think of keywords, right, around these 3, or now basically 4 main corporate innovation vehicles, I'd say M&A is what we would call buy. You would buy something to innovate. Venture capital is underinvest. So you put in money on something to innovate or get some form of growth. In external CBB, you would partner with something, someone, an entity to be able to get that growth or profit. And then internal CBB is you would be building something to be able to get that. So under M&A, generally, some of the goals and outcomes that people normally look for is they normally get access to new markets, or even complementary products, services, assets, tech processes, etc. whenever they acquire another company. And often also this would result to sometimes, generally an immediate increase in top line. Sometimes you see an sudden increase in market share just from the combination of these 2 entities, possibly an effect on the bottom line. And there may be overall parent company increase in valuation, but this also really depends on the market sentiment, right? How they feel an M&A will shape out. We've seen in the past M&As that don't also work out, and therefore, doesn't necessarily do an overall increase in the company valuation. For corporate venture capital, so just the term venture capital, right? Even without corporate tagged into it, generally they focus on getting some kind of financial gain. So whether this is in the midterm, usually it is in the midterm, and it's upon kind of a one-time sell or exit. And then a secondary thing that they're looking at is really getting some kind of insights on what is emerging out there in terms of products, services, tech, processes, etc. And because this is done now within a corporate setting, normally they're looking at it if these are complementary to their core, to their current portfolio. Sometimes they have business lines that may be dependent on these things, or maybe even, they're on the lookout for their future competitor, right? And they want to get insights from there. Now, external CVB, this is what we call partnering. And instead of just getting insights on what's emerging out there related to their core, they really want to get access, meaning deeper access into these emerging products and services. And therefore, it's not just necessarily about an immediate financial gain. And I'll talk a bit more about this later. Now, internal CVB, what sets it apart, I guess, from the 3, at least from our perspective, is you're generally building ideas. So you're building ventures from ideas. You're not buying an existing company, etc. You're not investing in an existing startup. You're not partnering with already, a developed technology, etc. by another group or entity. You're building something from within, either through your own venture building arm, which some corporates do, and I'll give examples later. But also you could co-build with someone else, which is like venture builder, an external venture builder, and that's what Embiggen Ventures is. Next slide. So when we talk about, who do they, what is that thing that they buy, they invest in, they partner with, or they build? We look at it from a kind of a range, from going from established companies, SMEs, you're investing in mature startups or early stage startups, or you're investing in ideas. I alluded to this earlier. M&A in general, not to say that all M&A just, would do this. You'd buy established companies, right? Or already SMEs. When you're in the venture capital space, you often tend to look at early stage startups with like high growth potentials, or something that has a rapid growth trajectory already. So you tend to be in the early stage, but it doesn't mean that it rules out investing in more mature startups. External CVB, when you're partnering also with startups and SMEs, technically they would be on the more mature side of things. So you have a developed technology, somebody has already started growing something or had some initial tests in market, and you can see customer acquisition trends, etc. But again, not to rule out that they would also partner with very early stage and very promising startups. What's very different is that internal CVB, you start off with ideas. Again, as I mentioned earlier, either generated internally by your own venture teams or with a venture builder, an external venture builder that is working with a corporation like Embiggen Ventures. Next slide. So how do we distinguish, again, also these different innovation vehicles from a monetary investment? So what is the corporate or the organization putting in? How much are they committing from a monetary perspective? When you're doing M&A or internal CVB, you tend to fund it fully, right? So M&A, you would buy the entity that you are acquiring or merging with. Internal CVB, you are funding the exploration of the ideas, eventual testing of the venture design, and then eventual scaling of it. You may get partners, but in generally, the corporation or the organization is the one funding it. In venture capital, corporate venture capital, you are one of the investors in your target entity, right? You're not necessarily the only one funding it. You're coming in within a pool of investors. And that's the same essentially with external CVB. Except CVC, more or less, or usually you tend to have a smaller share. And then when you're doing a partnership with someone, which is external CVB, you tend to invest more. Sometimes external CVBs eventually go into M&A, especially if it's very strongly aligned or with the core, or the relationship progresses into something very good, and the entity where you partner with or with whom you partner with tends to require a lot of the expertise of the parent company. So sometimes it may lead to an M&A. Next slide. Now, from an operational perspective, kind of how much does the parent company or the parent organization have to put in terms of operational commitment? So in M&A and internal CVB, this tends to be full on, you commit to it. You have to do it. Your teams, your own internal teams have to execute it. M&A, I put it, slightly in the middle, full and majority involvement, because sometimes when you buy, it still eventually becomes independently running, wholly owned subsidiary, right? So technically, the parent is not really on it day to day, but it's still there. The involvement is still there. Whereas CVB, you have to be committed to it, to do it full time, whether you have your own internal team or you work with an external venture builder. There's less operational involvement in the other two innovation vehicles. Again, as I mentioned, venture capital, you're putting in money more than anything. Not really giving, maybe you're providing some networking opportunities, connecting the entity you invested in with another person or another group in your network. But that's generally about it. In external CVV, when you partner, sometimes the entity requires a bit of your expertise. So we see a lot of this in pharmaceuticals, for example, investing in biotech, right? They partner with the biotech. The biotech may need the expertise of the pharmaceutical company, but at the same time, the pharmaceutical company at some point, may acquire that biotech. Next slide. Now, last kind of differentiation, but now including the corporate innovation vehicles with core R&D or BD, or meaning, the run-of-the-mill, normal corporate R&D and business development. And from the y-axis, you would see increasing levels of operational commitment, and on the x-axis is how aligned the target entities that they work with are to their current core. We alluded to this earlier. M&A tends to be very, very or almost directly aligned to the current core of a company. So generally, they won't acquire something that doesn't seem to have a direct impact to their core business. Internal CVV can go the range. It could be aligned to core or not aligned to core at all, which means an entirely different business. But both of them, internal CVV and M&A, tend to have high operational commitments, very much similar to the ongoing R&D and BD of the parent company. External CVV and corporate venture capital tend to be on the lower end of operational commitment, but external CVV tends to be more aligned to the current core. And corporate venture capital, it can go either way. So we'll see examples later of corporate venture capital that, even if they are in a certain industry, they would tend to invest in other industries that are sometimes even unrelated to the parent company's industry, mostly for the financial return. Next slide. So here are just examples across M&A, corporate venture capital, external corporate venture building, and internal corporate venture building. So M&A is a bit straightforward. So Disney acquired Pixar, Marvel, Google acquired Android, and a bit more newer M&As are Orange and Massmobile, and then Oracle and Cerner. In corporate venture capital, here we can see, so they are labeled as ventures, right? So like GV is Google Ventures, GE, General Electric Ventures. So they're labeled as ventures. But when you look at their operations, what they're really doing is scouting for companies across any industry. They don't have to be, for example, in the transport industry or mobility industry and Grab Ventures. It can invest in any startup that is promising. Same thing with Singtel, doesn't have to be in telecom, for example, and also with Toyota Ventures. Now, in external corporate venture building, as I mentioned earlier, these groups or names that you see here, we know what industries they belong to, and when you look at other operations, they tend to partner with startups within the same industry. So Pfizer Ventures would fund those, and also Merck, would fund those in the healthcare space. They don't really look at funding or working with ventures that are not in that space. The same with Nestle, Unilever, and Airbus. They work around their own industry. I worked with J&J Innovation, and it's somewhere in between internal corporate venture building and external corporate venture building, because they would do both investments just in pharma, but also they would invest in ideas coming from internal teams, which would be around corporate venture building. So one of the ideas in the past that we worked with was a project of mine that was started off in healthcare, but theoretically could have been a SaaS product that is sold out of healthcare. And so transitioning now to internal corporate venture building, the examples here, they tend to invest in ideas, whether done by their own teams, their own corporate innovation teams, or they put up some kind of ideation programs. So like Coca-Cola founders is somewhere around here, working with external people, but still investing in ideas. And a couple of the other examples here, like Rainmaking, Striber, 917, these are actually external venture builders, as I mentioned earlier, partnering with corporates or organizations. Next slide. So the next two slides, we wanted to give you an example of corporate innovation vehicles. All of them, like how can they work in an emerging market example, and then later on a developed market example. So here we see this is from Ayala Group, right? So at the rightmost, you would see the latest health super app, at least for the Philippines. And when you trace back really how we ended up with the super app called Consulta MD that I think was launched early this year, you would see the different corporate innovation vehicles at work in the past, eventually leading up to a Consulta MD. Here you see basically all the four corporate innovation vehicles that we just talked about earlier, right? So there was an M&A aspect to it. There was a CVC at some point, and then they both did some kind of external corporate venture building and internal corporate venture building. Now, an example in a developed market is Disney. So now we know of Disney Plus, but then tracing that back again to how we got to Disney Plus today, starting off from Disney, you'd also see several corporate innovation vehicles at work. A lot of them in the beginning, mostly M&A, and then they eventually ventured into corporate venture building closer to the creation of Disney Plus as we know it today. So another way one could look at, right, what type of corporate innovation vehicle is probably right for my company or my organization, or what can I afford to do, and not necessarily afford to do just from a financial perspective, but given the resources, teams I have, their capabilities. So we tried to look at it from what capabilities are required, spanning from corporate versus entrepreneur expertise or capabilities, and that's the y-axis. And then on the x-axis, you would see a range of should you have expertise in internal operations, or should you be very good external scanning or creating external collaborations. M&A tends to be, you need to be strong at your internal operations and corp strategy. Obviously, you would need to know what to acquire. So there may be an external scanning or collaboration piece there, but largely people would need to know how to execute, how to integrate something, and understand how this works well with their overall strategy. For corporate venture capital, which is the yellow box, this is mostly, you need to be able to scan the environment, right? So it's generally like venture capital. You're looking for opportunities out there, scouting, creating or structuring the deal, but also you need to have an understanding of how the entity is built to be able to identify whether this will have potential succeed in the future, and therefore if you exit, you would realize the financial gain that you're looking for. The bottom two look at the difference between external CVV and internal CVV. Now, external CVV leans more to the external scanning side, partly because, as we mentioned earlier, it was about partnering. So you're looking for startups, SMEs, entities that you can partner with because they are aligned to your core. Whereas internal CVV leans towards more internal operations and having strong also entrepreneurship experience, because now you need to build ideas from ground up, and then eventually launch that and eventually integrate that one way or another to the parent company. Next slide. So also, as a summary, I guess we wanted to look at, aside from, what resources, what skills you might need to identify which corporate innovation vehicle would be right, because neither one or the other is really better off. It's at some point which one is suitable for an organization or a corporation, depending on their own innovation journey, right? And we saw that all in the examples of for emerging markets and even for developed markets. All of them have applied at some point at one of the four innovation vehicles. So just these are studies, and in the y-axis you would see the rate of return on those innovation investments, and on the x-axis you would see the level of risk. So internal CVB and M&A research would show tend to have a higher rate of return, but the level of risk is lower for internal CVB. And likely this may have to do with being able to more or less, quote unquote, have some more control of the process on building the ideas, developing it, and aligning it to the core. Mostly because M&A, you tend to work with an established company, right, that has its own systems, own processes, etc., own products and services. Now, external CVB and corporate venture capital are in between, with the rate of return of venture capital lower than any of the venture building routes or even M&A, and a little bit of a higher risk. Well, I think as we mentioned earlier, venture capital, this is, you're putting money in completely independent corporation. You're just, or not necessarily corporation, startup or SMEs, right? And you're letting them run the show, and you're essentially evaluating whether they would do well or not. And that's why you're investing in them. So depending on what you see is the kind of return you're expecting, the level of risk you may want to take, and also even capabilities available to an organization or a corporation, you may take one, two, or even all of the corporate innovation vehicles at any point in the innovation journey of an organization. Next slide. So now I'll transition really quickly to internal corporate venture building, because this is what we do at Embiggen Ventures. So for us, internal corporate venture building is really when organizations, they deliberately and systematically explore, establish, and also grow potential sources of revenue or profit. And this is really, their goal is sustainable or exponential growth. And they do this by putting in very unique or independent KPIs that are not the core KPIs. They dedicate resources, and something very key is to leverage their core assets. Either they do this through an internal but independent entity. That's what I was saying. You have your own venture building unit, you create your own, or you partner with an external venture builder. And they do this while they maintain, protect, or grow their core. So they're not doing this on its own, right? Their core has to grow as they do this. Next slide. Okay, we can skip this one. It's the same. So for internal corporate venture building, typically, because one of the key things here is that the ideas essentially should leverage existing assets, right? So usually anyone who does internal corporate venture building, hits this dilemma, because they're really fighting for existing assets. And there's the core business, there's your core R&D, new business development, or even emerging business opportunities, right? And there's your internal corporate venture building. And you're all fighting for existing assets. So this tends to be a challenge when looking for resources to fund internal CVB, which, if you would remember in earlier slides, needs higher amount of monetary commitment from the corporation or the organization. But this one is critical because being able to answer this, like what existing asset you use in the ideas that are presented for internal corporate venture building, allows the team doing it to be able to justify why this company or this organization is supposed to do that. Otherwise, if it doesn't leverage anything, you might as well just do a venture in the wild, right? You might as well just do a startup or let somebody else do this. Because then the corporation would not have kind of an unfair advantage to move forward with this idea. Next slide. So very quickly, just because in the interest of time, for us in internal corporate venture building, we don't necessarily limit ideas for just something that's very far from the core. So in the next couple of slides, there are a couple of examples that will show that in internal corporate venture building can bring up ideas or ventures that are very close to the core of the parent company, sometimes adjacent to it, and sometimes very far from it. Next slide. So for example, I'm not sure how many of you have heard about Qantas Assure. Qantas Assure is a health insurance product by an aircraft, Qantas, right? So they are the official carrier of Australia, and they created the health insurance product. The inspiration started out from they needed to be able to increase the revenues of Qantas as air travel, essentially, right? And the way to be able to do that happened to be getting into the health insurance business. So it's very far from the core, but that's how they were eventually able to do it. They leveraged something that they needed to do, which is to improve the Qantas loyalty program, their customer behavior and customer base. So this is the assets that they work with. Next example. So Wonolo, one slide back, please. Wonolo is from Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola, we all know what type of product they produce. Wonolo is essentially almost like a marketplace for workers. So it has nothing to do with Coke or manufacturing beverages, F&B. It doesn't even have anything to do with distribution. It's a tech employment marketplace. And what inspired the idea was an internal pain point. So they were trying to solve a problem within Coca-Cola. And because of solving that problem, they spun out this business. And so we can see here at the bottom right, it has secured funding ever since its establishment. Next slide. GCash, you probably heard about this. It's a very famous example from locally, from the Philippines. It's a unicorn now. And it's a fintech platform. But obviously, Globe, where it came from, was in telecoms. And so what they also leveraged were initially, before GCash became what it is today, it was actually on an SMS mode. So what they wanted to do was to be able to reach the overseas workers and help them remit their money. And that was the initial inspiration that has now become a super fintech. Next slide. Nespresso, this one is close to core, also adjacent to core. Nestle was just an F&B manufacturing and distribution, but their venture eventually became equipment. So they started off really with an existing customer unmet need from their current core business. But eventually what they had to do to solve that was to manufacture equipment, which is the Nespresso machine. It's one of the biggest contributors to the Nestle business, adding about 7 billion in revenues annually. Next slide.
Let's do a last example, Kristine. Then.
Yep.
Is that okay? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Actually, maybe we can go to the summary already. Can you go this? So yeah, I guess the thought we wanted to put out here is that internal corporate venture building has been successful across different industries, with the new ventures coming out either very close to the parent company or far from the parent company's industry. Inspiration has come from both the internal and external environment, and they could have been product services or even SaaS, software. And then their growth setup when they have grown have become either just operating units, wholly owned subsidiaries, and many other forms. Next. Yep. So I guess we'll end there.
Thank you, Kristine. So yeah, HP, thank you very much. Thank you guys. Thank you.
You guys, first of all, I think this was a very insightful presentation with a lot of education components in there, where people can see the relationship of risk, the relationship of proximity of core strategy, and actionability and all that. So for those of you who have got questions, please post them on the chat or put your hand up and I'll call on you. And I've got a couple of questions for you guys to get started. Rolan and Kristine, how much money do you think is being put aside on an average corporation, which is, let's say, $1 billion company or something? How much money is being put aside for corporate venturing today versus innovation management inside their own company? So, because this is where I was really surprised about the amount of money that is being invested in the strategy of looking for growth from corporate venturing. So approximate, what's the dollar amount of investment being made per company or overall?
You know what, HP, I think we should ask Vince here. Good example is Ayala. They have, like, for example, for CVC, they have 3 funds. And I think a lot of funds also for their internal venture building. Maybe we should just give Vince, you want to give us an estimate of how Ayala does it?
Sure. Thanks, Rolan. The CVC has 3 funds. The first has like 5 million. That was for seed. The second is 50, and the third one that's really for the Ayala Group is $180 million US. But that's only for the CVC. The Venture Lab has their own funding.
Okay. Yep. So Vince, thank you. Vince is from the Ayala Group, and for those of you who are in the GIMI IOP community, Ayala will be hosting an event in November for the GIMI CTPs as well as the GCIO members. But they are a multi industry conglomerate, and they are also investing. And so this is in the Philippines as an example. And my learning from a friend from Roland Burger, Stefan Gachstatter, where he did the presentation a couple of months ago, he said the amount of money invested was approximately about $150 billion worldwide when you add the corporations together. So when you go into any one company, Roland, if you ask what is the innovation management budget for doing it internally, and then you look at the amount of money they're planning to put in corporations outside of corporate venturing, it's almost like 10 times even or 100 times more, because the CFO seems to be involved in this thing. So is this where it's coming from, where the who's putting the pressure on the leadership teams of big corporations saying this is another avenue for growth, and it seems it's disproportionately being invested in compared to R&D and compared to even innovation management inside companies? So is it because it's owned by the CFO? Who's owning this challenge in companies?
Well, at least in our experience, what we've seen is either it's the board or the CEO who wants to do this. In our case, the CFOs don't really think like venture capitalists, right? Which we think they should, at least if they're doing even innovation management internally, right? But the main driver that we've seen are CEOs. Or if they're a medium-sized company, it's usually the business owner or the first gen business owner. In family businesses, maybe third gen. We've seen that. Yeah, Kristine, you wanna
Excellent.
chime in?
Yeah, it's normally triggered by, when they see in 5 years, so like they have a glide path for growth, whether that's top line or bottom line, right? And they run their normal growth rates if they did the same thing over and over for the next 4 years. And they often see some kind of gap. So once they see that gap, then there's a trigger. What do I do to cover that gap? Because then I have a growth aspiration. Yeah, and so you get the conversation started from there, at least again from our experience.
So C-level conversations, big budgets are being created for funding in this thing. And then there's a challenge. What kind of ideas to invest into and then how to make it real is the next part. So let me ask you the question in terms of not the idea generation part. You have already alluded that you can do that close to core or adjacent to core or even far from core. My question is the teams. What are you learning about the teams, the internal teams that you might drive towards creating corporate venturing versus the fact that this is kind of new for organizations and it's a new behavior for corporations. So can you tell us about the challenges corporations are having in terms of trying to do corporate venturing?
Kristine, you want to take this?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest challenges is when you have the same person doing venturing and running the business, it gets very tough to differentiate what I need to deliver for the short term for the analysts, for my valuation at the end of this quarter, my quarterly ratings, versus what I need to do for the long term. I mean, this might sound cliche, right? There's always the short term, long term trade off, but then it gets very clear when it's the same person doing it. Now, the flip side to that is having a fully independent team, which is also tough because they tend to lose sight of strategically where this parent company is going. And we need to keep that alignment very close, right? Otherwise, what I said earlier, you're becoming a venture in the wild. You're like doing a startup on your own because now you're not leveraging the unfair advantage of a corporation and you're not aligned to that. And when you get to the latter stages of now you need to scale an idea and it's not aligned anymore, strategically aligned to the core business, then you suddenly hit, a wall with the board when you ask for bigger funding because now what does that mean for me, right? So finding that balance between the two, that middle ground is often the toughest part because it's the teams that will make the ideas work or run at some point.
So Kristine, in the past, as a result of the short-term, mid-term, long-term challenge, we began to create the role of the Chief Innovation Officer, who was supposed to help manage that future businesses and future opportunities, while the CEO could focus on through his COO on the current and through his Chief Innovation Officer on future and other things. Now, what you're saying is when it comes to corporate venturing, for some reason, it's not a Chief Innovation Officer who's been assigned to it. It seems to be still being kept close to the CEO, perhaps because the budget is so big. So my question is do you think there's going to be another role evolving called a Chief Corporate Venture Officer? And he or she reports directly to the CEO also, and somebody who will focus internally and somebody focus externally?
So I've seen this in other conglomerates. They call it the Chief Transformation Officer, both internal and external. But at the same time, there's also a different sort of CEO or managing director for their venturing unit and corporate venture building unit. that reports to perhaps an innovation council. It will depend per company and structure. But I know of one conglomerate that has a chief ventures officer. That's separate from the chief transformation officer.
No, this is
yeah,
Roland.
yeah.
Roland is becoming clearer and clearer that this is increasing complexity for the CEO, and the CEO's role is to manage all of these things. So they create positions at some point, and you may be about to evolve into a new role that this is a little harder to manage. And how do you do that? And maybe there's an assigned role for it, whether it's under the Chief Innovation Officer or whether it's under the CEO that goes with that. Brett's got a question. Brett, I'm going to put you on the spotlight and see if you would like to ask a question.
Oh, sure, I can ask that. I may have missed this, and I apologize if I did, Roland and Kristine. But how are these corporations finding some of these opportunities? For example, I've been hired in the past by large corporations because of the nature of my work, going to conferences, speaking, working in innovation, as a scout. So I've been put on a retainer to say, you go out in the world and you watch for opportunities that fit with our strategic initiatives. How are these large companies finding these? Because I know there's a lot of startups out there that would like to get into those large companies to get some support and financing, but it's difficult to figure out who's looking for what and how to get into these large corporations.
If the company has a sort of formal corporate venture capital unit, they have a formal deal flow process. So I think that the deal flow usually acts as the funnel for these organizations to invest on or whatever, do JV or M&A or something like that, right? I have not yet seen, or either they outsource that to a company, let's say called Plug and Play or Quest Ventures, who do corporate venture capital, or an independent consultant like me. Brett. So that's what I've seen in the market, but maybe other people have seen differently in this call. Yeah.
On the idea space, so great. Yeah, so just a quick note like on the idea space. So if in the venture capital they have a deal flow, there's almost like a pipe, an ideas pipe, right? And they have, usually you would set criteria on what goes through the pipe. Normally there's some kind of like evaluate the ideas and their potential and their probabilities. And as they move through the testing, you shave off ideas that are not, or just go low in probability, don't demonstrate some results in the initial tests. Yeah, so it's a combination of aligning specifically what is that strategic goal, but at the same time, you can't remove the financials of it, right? So once the probability of your initial quantified numbers for an idea starts to go down, the results aren't showing, you clean off the funnel, and then you eventually get down like a deal flow to the ideas that you want to scale.
Yeah, and just I'm sorry, just to continue on. Yeah, because I've noticed sometimes at pitch contests, the big companies walk out when the pitch starts. And I wonder if sometimes that's because they're afraid that if they get an idea and then they bring it back to their company, that they'll be accused of stealing the idea or something like that. But there's a lot of great ideas that would work really well into corporations if they just had some way to go out there and identify those ideas and incubate and encourage these people under their umbrella and have the right of first refusal, once the product is developed. It's just, I think it's a real opportunity for people. And so thanks for your time.
Thank you, Brett. Roland and Kristine, just to make sure, we are hitting 10 o'clock and we should let the people who are signed up for this time block and they got other things to do, we'll let them go. So first, I just want to say, everybody, thank you very much for those who are interested, please stay online for a few more minutes. We'll continue discussing this. So we're not wrapping it up, but for those who need to leave, we understand. So for the wrap up, here's my summary of what I've really heard. Corporate venturing is really a real big thing. There's a lot of money behind it. It's very difficult to do, and it requires probably consulting help and other expert help to make it real. It requires your access to the CEO. It's big budgets, therefore it's high-level CEO conversations. And in there, you've got to be very sensitive to the local capabilities of the company to be able to leverage and really do something about it. And adjacent growth is probably easiest to grow. Core growth is not that interesting, and far growth will be difficult. And so somewhere in the adjacent growth might be the sweet spot for this particular opportunity. So with that, Roland and Kristine, is there anything you guys want to just tell everybody as a word of advice or encouragement or anything else that you want to talk about in Vegan? 1 minute. You have the last word. We're going to end the session and then we'll come back and continue talking.
No, I think, so I think we can do a lot of partnerships. I think the GIMI IXL sort of framework is a sort of direct next step would be venture building if they actually want to build these ventures. Maybe you can send me a message. I saw Crisanto's message about saying that Indonesia might be a good place. Actually, we're launching out of Singapore and we're doing Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand next few months, and we'll see how that goes. But if you have possible corporate venture building prospects or clients, maybe we can do co-service delivery and let's see where that takes us. So I hope to see you guys here in November. We'll be hosting some few things. So thank you guys. Kristine?
Yep. I know it can sound really tough and overwhelming, but the reason why I'm here is because I missed the opportunity to scale a venture that I did in J&J, right? I said it was healthcare. It grew my core business. It could have been a SaaS product. And I know that it could have been because somebody took the idea and made it happen. So I hope that I think, other people won't make that same mistake and won't miss that opportunity because it's revenue and profit.
Excellent. Thank you, Kristine. Thank you, Roland. We learned about corporate venture building today, and it's another leg for growth strategies for any company. At the end, companies are looking for growth, and that growth could come from internal, it could come from external, and it's got its own risk profiles and risk tolerance of the companies. And so you got to be very careful how you mix and match with the company you're working with. But it is another pillar, and it's very exciting right now. Lots of investments are being made in this particular direction. So all of you are listening in, think about whether you want to try and get into this game, collaborate with Ambigun to try and figure out how to do it better, faster, quicker. Because remember, our philosophy at GIMI always is together we can and we will. And thank you very much, and tune in next week.